All right, we are live with Chris Wirth. What's up, man?
Nothing, my man. How are you? I'm just really excited to be here, and you were a guest on my show, so every time I get the opportunity to return a favor, I'm super, super excited. So thank you for allowing me to be here today.
Well, I had to return the favor. Since you already talked about being on your show, why don't you give a quick plug about your show, and we'll do that again later. But go ahead and give a quick plug about your show, and then let the audience know who you are.
I appreciate it. So the podcast is No Quit Living. Company is the same name, No Quit Living, and I'm a speaker, trainer, and a coach as well as an author. And my whole MO is originally sports-based. I played 2 sports in college, played a bunch of sports growing up, and I coached high school, AAU, and college basketball. So for me, the coaching perspective is really in my I think blood throughout my entire life. But it's just really exciting to inspire people to never give up, and that's literally everything we gear our company as well as our podcast is just inspiring people, those tough times. And a question I ask on my show is for each guest no quit story. And almost every single time somebody says, well, which one do you want? So I think the reality is everybody knows the Rocky story. Everybody knows and loves a comeback story. And I think it's not about if you fall in life, it's what you do with it. And it's not about the failures. It's about how you come back better, stronger, faster, and just more experienced.
Well, then obviously I need to ask, what's your no quit living story?
So I will hit you with my follow-up to that is, which one, jokingly, but I think for me, it's the one that I'm ironically still living. Is I went through a pretty brutal divorce, 2 years plus now, as far as just the process of 3 amazing young kids that were involved, obviously, because as you know, when you're married with kids, there's just the reality is there's a mom and a dad, and you got to get in the middle indirectly and directly. But it's taught me a lot, and I can say the one amazing factor is I talk a lot on my show as well as from stage with my clients about the people who are on your bus, in your corner, and in your tribe. And I think what I realized during this past 2+ years is some people that were good friends and business acquaintances kind of, took themselves off my bus kind of when I, needed them and would have needed them the most. And some new people came on. And I think the reality for me is what I changed my lane in my mind was saying that this didn't happen to me, but it happened for me. And you and I have spoken offline, and that was definitely, it's a lot easier said than done, but I was writing it down. I was saying it. I was affirming it early on. And, I was almost a fraud in my mind in the sense because I didn't fully understand it and believe it. But the reality is at the end of this, you're going to learn and grow. But the opportunities, do you make the best out of it? And do you, woe is me? Or do you really, knuckle down and say, okay, I'm going to make something good out of this? And it's been a challenge. But the reality is I don't think anybody wants to ever go through something like that. I don't think you ever aim to get married or have kids or start a business, a friendship, and say, you know what, I hope this friendship or business or marriage, ends, abruptly. But the reality is there's one of 2 ways to go through it, and positive or negative. And I think for me, I can say that I've tried to go through it as positive as I can, both personally with my kids and with my family and friends.
I appreciate you sharing that. It makes me think of a quote, and I need to get a lot better at remembering who said what. But it's I think it was a TED Talk, which was a lot of people have dead people goals where they don't want to experience problems. They don't want to experience pain or all the negative emotions. And it was basically that those are dead people problems. And so I think what we have at the end of the day is what you kind of touched on there is perspective, right? It's like, we're going to go through pain. We're going to go through problems. And at the end of the day, it's like, what do you make for it? And you kind of touched on, hey, is this happening to me or is this happening for me? And you felt like you were kind of faking it for a little bit, which, obviously we've met each other through, which was an Instagram ad for the journal that I have that I've been pushing out. And then you reached out to me and asked me on the podcast, but we're really close in kind of our journey right now. Obviously we've had 2 different paths, but myself being divorced, and really that's what I think you connected with me on, was that I shared my story about my no quit living or my no quit living story on yours. But I had a question is like, you said it taught you a lot to go through that, about people who were on your bus and off your bus. What did you learn from that?
That's about 17 and a half hours. No, I think the biggest thing was what I realized is I think the perspective of humility. I think I learned a lot about myself, but I also learned the importance of being there for other people. And I think the reality within that lesson is there were probably multiple times in my life when I could have reached out to somebody, not just through a divorce perspective, but maybe a challenging time with their business or their family, or maybe a mother or father was sick. Fill in the blank as far as those opportunities. And I think what it taught me, and it still teaches me every day, is a lot of my quote unquote friends and people that were in my circle that I had hoped would reach out and check in. They did initially, some never did. And some people that I was really close to at a certain point just kind of, took themselves off my bus. And I think from the perspective of going back to, well, woe was me, and, this happened to me, not for me, those type of things, all of a sudden you say, okay, well, I can only look at this, or I can only think about this in one of two ways. One, make it negative and focus on, well, Kale left, he didn't ask me how I was doing, and he never reached out and sent me text message. And you can go down that spiral of negativity, or you can go down the other path, which is, well, who are those people that have really been there for you? Who are those people that have genuinely reached out, text messages, phone calls? Hey, you want to grab a drink? You want to go out to dinner? You want to get together this weekend? You want to get a workout in? And I think what I realized is, and Bob Berg, who unbelievable author, he wrote the series, the Go Giver series. He's New York Times bestselling author. He's got his own podcast. He shared with me, literally, he was guest number one on my podcast, and he's actually not only a good friend, but a mentor of mine. And he said that people come in and out of your life at different points. And sometimes there'll be people that are there for your entirety. Sometimes people will be there for a very short period of time to teach you one thing or to challenge you in one way. And you'll have some people that are there professionally, some people that are there, friends, just in middle school or just high school or just college or after. And I now use that analogy with the bus perspective. So let's say you and I were best friends growing up, and all of a sudden we both go to college in different parts of the country. You played a college sport, I played a college sport. The reality is maybe we get busy and we lose touch. So we both went from being in that first row on each other's buses to now being maybe in that fifth, sixth, seventh row. We still see each other at holidays, and when we come home for the summer, something like, oh, hey, how you doing? How's it going? And it doesn't mean that you're wrong or I'm wrong or either of us are bad people. It's just that life happens. And I think the other really neat thing was that I realized that every time somebody either got off my bus or went to the back of the bus, it allowed somebody else to get on and somebody else to move up closer. And I think that's something that, when I was talking about the fraud perspective, is this didn't happen to me, it happened for me. At first it's difficult to realize that and really put it into perspective. But all of a sudden, when you establish those new relationships, those new friendships, new podcasts to listen to, books to read, all of a sudden you're like, wow, these things do really happen for a reason. And the question is, do you look at it and approach it, in a positive perspective, or again, do you go down that negative road? And I think they're both very common and they're both easy to do, but they're not ever going to happen on their own.
It's, you're speaking right to my soul right there. And as I've kind of told my listeners here that I quit my job recently. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because you talked about creating space, creating a space on the bus for new people to get on. And I really feel that way in my life by letting somebody off my bus, which was my job, right? Which was taking it was taking like 5 seats on this bus, right? And once you boot it off the bus, you create this space. And for me, I was on the verge. In my mind, I had made it up before we had met that I was done with my job. But obviously in the short time, I was able to do the podcast, it's not just people on and off your bus, but it's opportunity. And something that kind of spoke to me there as you were discussing, really who was on and off your bus during the divorce time. It kind of brought up in my mind the expectation and the attachment we have. So for me, I remember, I would want, you use me as an example. Kale didn't reach out to me or this person. So a lot of times I think in relationships, especially in relationships, personal relationships that when I was going through my difficult time, I had this expectation that my parents are going to do this, be this way for me. Or I have this expectation that the spouses, my ex-spouse's family is going to be this way, or my friends are going to be this way. And there's this expectation that I put on it that also kind of muddies the water of that relationship, which could end it soon because I had this expectation that it's supposed to be a certain way. And so I didn't know if you kind of felt that way too, or if you felt like you've lost some relationships or moved on from some, not necessarily lost, I don't want to say lost, but when you were going through that difficult time, did you feel like you had a certain expectations for those people in your life?
That's a really powerful question. And I think to answer it completely transparent with you is I don't think I had expectations per se. I don't think I had a desired end result. I think what I had in the back of my mind is something that I just wrote down as you're talking. I always take notes, is the difference of somebody being there for you versus them doing it for you. And what I mean by that is the hope is that your parents are there for you. And obviously everybody doesn't have parents. Some people have passed away. Some people don't have relationships. But the hope is that your parents are there for you and your friends are there for you during both the best times and the worst times. And what I realized is you have to take ownership for it. And what I mean by that is if you and I were best friends, if you were going through your divorce when you did, the reality is hopefully you would know that I'm going to be there for you in your corner. I'm going to be on your bus. I'm going to be in your tribe, but I'm not going to do it for you. And I think that's the thing that is very different when people realize, well, like, Cale wasn't there for me. So what do you mean he wasn't there for you? Well, he talked to me and, but he didn't help me get an attorney, or he didn't help with, all of a sudden it goes into, okay, well, let's take a deep dive into that for a second. You just said he wasn't there for you. Now we've admitted that he was. He took you out to lunch. You grabbed, drinks. You grabbed workouts. He gave you his ear, but he wasn't supposed to, or it's not his quote unquote job to do the other things. And I think in today's society, a lot of people look at what people don't do, and we just had a pretty successful live forum this past Saturday, and one of our speakers was fantastic, and he focused a little bit of his talk on, instead of focusing on the things you don't have, focus on the things that you do have. And not only was it an amazing event as far as the feedback from people, but the feedback that I've gotten myself as the host of this event from that specific talk and that specific comment. A gentleman this morning did a 2-minute video on Instagram, and he specifically spoke about that. And I think that's the beauty of just becoming a better version of yourself is again, and it's not that in any way, I don't want any of your listeners to think that, I'm this super positive guy and no matter what hits me, I'm like, this is amazing. This is great. We all have those tough times, but even within those tough times, especially going through the craziness of the coronavirus and COVID, is we still have a ton of things. Every single person has those things, those people that we can be grateful for and we can say thank you to. And instead of saying, well, I don't have this, or, this coronavirus is going to last another month or two. Okay, well, what do you have? Well, you have a job, you have a roof over your head, you have family, friends, you have fill in the blank. And it was just amazing how he worded it, but the simplicity of how he did it was why I was able to connect with so many people the way it did.
There's a lot to breaking something down into a simple format. I'm curious because I was able to hop on for a little bit to your event. If you could just simply plug that real quick and let me know when the next one is for sure.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. So we've been using the hashtag since I think September, October of 2019. We rise by lifting others up. In no way, shape, or form did we obviously know it was coming down the road in March of this year. But I have a very strong circle of friends, people that are very close to me and people that have supported the whole No Quit Living mission message. And I connected with 8 other speakers, so myself being one of them. So there are 9 of us in total, famous actor, best-selling author, one of the top college basketball coaches, and just other successful people that I've connected with. And basically the pitch, if you call it, was, hey, I'm looking to put together a forum where we bring 9 people, myself being one of them, and just inspire people to never give up and inspire people during these challenging times. And the cool thing was there's some amazing summits and things out there. I'm not knocking in any way, but I know a lot of them pitch certain things. They, speakers jump on and they have books or they have courses and things. Our whole number one goal, 2 goals and 2 rules were, 1, we wanted to just motivate everybody, inspire everybody. 2, we wanted it to be free, so everybody jumped on. The 2 rules, or I guess requirements that we asked each speaker is, 1, to connect your video, something along the lines of "We rise by lifting others up," and that was literally it. You can share whatever. And the second thing is, not a single person pitched a book, a product, a podcast, a course. It was 100% for the viewers. And we're going to be doing one in the next 3 weeks. Again, we're actually just finalizing a date, and also waiting to hear back from some of the people that were on it. But it's been amazing. And I think the reality is I have an amazing team behind me. The feedback that I got was, how did you get it to look like it was literally everybody was in the same studio, and the quality? And I say, I've got an amazing team behind me, and I take a very, very small amount of credit. The video and the audio and my design guy that does a lot of my social media stuff are fantastic. And selfishly, I think they're some of the best, because the work they do is second to none.
Of course. So team, because that was one of the questions I had, and I kind of told you, like, this is off cuff, this is just conversation, but I did have some questions for you. Is like the first thing I get now in the morning, since we kind of you turned me on to Marco Polo, is a video of you getting ready to hit the trails. And so I'm curious to know, like, I'm curious to know your schedule, right? Because you do more than the podcast. You have more going on in the podcast. I'd love for you to talk about that. But then also just kind of like, what's your motivation behind the 700 push-ups you did the other day? Like, what's the fitness goal? What's the just kind of go into that a little bit there of managing your schedule, what you do, because you do multiple things, and then I want to know a little bit more about the workout goals, because that's my
that was like 17 questions in one.
I can add more if you'd like.
I mean, sure. I love trying to get stumped, but yeah, for me, I do a lot of stuff. So I have No Quit Living, which not only is a podcast, but also I do a lot of speaking and coaching and training, work with a couple of college basketball teams and a lot of real estate individuals, and as well as sales teams. I also run a wealth management firm, which I've been doing since college. I love it. It's been amazing to help our clients, with their finances, whether it's estate planning, whether it's protection, whether it's growing. And the perspective of my schedule and how I do it, it's interesting, but as I've gotten older, I require less amount of sleep. And I know that sounds kind of silly, and I don't want in any way to make it seem like I, go to bed at 11 o'clock and I wake up at 1 o'clock and I'm ready to go. But for me, the whole personal development world, and I've kind of coined the term self-improvement movement. And what I realized is some of the most successful people that I look up to are the ones that are doing a lot. And I don't mean jack of all trades, master of none a lot. I'm talking about, if you look at some of the CEOs in some of the most successful companies, they read 50, 60, 70 books a year. And when I say successful companies, I'm not talking about 10 million, 20 million. I'm talking about multiple billion-dollar businesses, and they're running, thousands and thousands of employees, and they can still take time to read. They can still take time to work out. They can still take time to see their kids and do all this stuff. And that is something that is super important to me. And a question I ask on every podcast, and selfishly, I think that my podcast has helped not only a ton of listeners, but ironically, it's helped me a lot, because one of the questions I ask each guest is two things. One, are you reading something? Because I'm always reading. I read a ton of books. But the second thing is I inquire about their morning routine. And some of the most successful people that have been on my show, and I'm talking NFL players, NBA players, best-selling authors, people that are just amazingly successful, unbelievably famous, and just normal people, they break down their morning routine. And what I realize is so many people get up earlier, and the reason they get up earlier is to have that time, that uninterrupted time for themselves. So many of them have kids like you and I do, and they made a decision, okay, my kids get up at 6:30 or 7 o'clock. So if I'm getting up at 6:30 or 7 o'clock and I'm just jumping into my day, and then I'll find a workout later and do this. And for me, I just got myself into the routine. And my gym that I go to, which obviously everybody's gyms are closed right now, but it opens up at 4 a.m. And I've been going to the gym for the last 4 years at 4 a.m. every day, unless I'm physically not here, if I'm speaking or traveling. But what it does is it allows me to start my day on my terms. And then I always get to the office early, and I have my morning routine of journaling, meditating. I read stuff, and I have, similar to your planner, your journal that you have, is I have a 2-pager that I use for my clients, and I use myself, and it's just something that's very specific to me. So what I realized is the earlier I can get up, the more time I have for myself before those distractions. And even when I was married, it was the same thing. It would sit down with my ex and we'd figure out, okay, what's the schedule this weekend? If she had to go to the gym crazy early, then I would, get the kids up, and it's, you make time for the things that are important. And it's funny, one of the things I speak often on is the importance of time blocking. And obviously you have your journal, your planner, your calendar, whatever you want to call it, you yourself, as well as people listening. But what I realized is that some of the most successful people, they block off certain things. So for example, they say, this is what I'm going to do. And when I do a lot of speaking, people say, well, I'm quote unquote busy. And I always say, what are you going to give me, excuse-itis? And the reality is, I always talk about this. Every single one of us listening today, people listening in the future, yourself, myself included, we all have the same 24 hours every day. And what I always tell people, I said, if you show me your calendar or your planner or your journal for the last week and this week coming up, if it's real and you have what you have on there, I can pretty accurately, I'd say to 90-95%, tell you what your priorities are. And people laugh and they kind of, they'll fold their arms and say, well, I said, no, I said, no, what I'm saying, I'm not saying you're a bad person or you're lazy. I'm saying if you give me your planner, your calendar, your journal, I can pretty accurately tell you what's important. And that's something for me that I'm super cognizant of as I build and grow my business, because I want to be able to communicate that to my clients as well.
That's huge. I mean, kind of touched on something there. It's just getting really real. Like it's, and to some point, like I got to meet some people where they're at too. The people I like to work with are the people that are open to that, right? They're open to growth. They're open to learning more, understanding that they haven't figured it all out, which for me, I was definitely a person up until really recently that I was a person that knew everything, right? I knew what I knew and I was good and I was right in a lot of ways. So for me, it's like getting really real. So you talked about like, show me your schedule and I'll show you where your priorities are at. And two parts to that. One that comes up is like, that's a good thing, because then you're just getting really real with like, what is important to you, right? Because it's okay. Like if you're a family person or you're a relationship person or you're like whatever person you want to lump yourself into, it's okay, right? But let's not pretend or beat around the bush that you're not this, right? Or that you don't have time. I think for me, I think I'm on day like 70 of my morning routine of like realizing like I need to get up earlier. I need to get up earlier because it's the only time I truly have for myself. It's it, right? Like, and I could stay up later, but at the end of the day, not a lot's really going to work for you that late at night. That's when I get creative work. Maybe I can see myself, being more artistic at that point in time. If I was a musician or a painter or, any of those things, like that's when creative work comes out in a different realm. But as far as focused work, it just doesn't happen. If I push off my workout till the afternoon, it usually goes to the evening, and then it usually doesn't happen. So by having my morning routine that, it stabilizes the ship, right? It's like the day is going to throw you off your schedule. The day, like you can't be to a point, especially with kids, where you're like super rigid and everything is locked down and you're going to hit everything. It's just not realistic. And probably for me, not even enjoyable if it was, right? I even schedule openness in my calendar. Like I schedule an hour of just like, what will I do now? Right? Because I want that curiosity in my brain. I want to be able to like not be so focused where I become tunnel visioned on only what I'm doing, that I'm open and observant of other things around me. But the morning for me has been a time that has really been focused for me to say, okay, I can get my journaling in. I can get my movement in for the day and not feel guilty, right? Nothing crazy. I don't do a CrossFit workout early in the morning. Literally just get really in touch with my body where I have a goal. I can't remember where I got this goal and I'm stealing this goal, but it's I'm preparing for the Centurion Olympics, right? Like I want to be 100 at the Olympics and be prepared for that. So I don't know if you can relate to this as a former college athlete, but I used to beat the hell out of my body. Like I would, and you actually talked about this before we actually hopped on live. It's like, I'm ultra competitive and, I'll sit in the sauna and I'll look at that guy and I'll be like, no, I gotta do this. Like, I gotta stay in here longer. Like, I have that in me.
The thing that it's funny you just said that is, and the interesting perspective of being super competitive is, and some of my buddies know this, and at my gym, they have a huge sauna and steam room, there's, sometimes a bunch of us go in the same times, in the morning, and my buddies that are there with me know that like a guy comes in, like a new guy, and like I've made eye contact or said hello, and my buddies look at me and it's like, all right, he doesn't even know that he just, entered a competition. He's just, thinking he's going to sit there for a couple minutes. And in my mind, I was like, hey, good morning. How you doing? He's like, oh, good. In my mind, I'm like, all right, buddy, let's go. May the best man win. But, there's a gentleman, this guy, Jake Thompson. I just interviewed him on my podcast, and he actually sent me a copy of his new book. It's called Compete Every Day. That's his company. And Pat Williams, the former general manager of the Orlando Magic, was a guest of mine. And Jake and I were talking that Pat shared with me that competition should bring out the best in you. And I think that's something that people don't realize. And if you're competitive to the point where you have no friends and you're demeaning people like, oh yeah, I got you, loser, like that's obviously not a good perspective. But the first person you should always compete with and against is yourself. But the second perspective is it's okay to compete with others. And I think Zig Ziglar was an amazing human being. He said something on one of his CDs, one of his programs. He said, don't root against somebody, root for somebody. And he said it and actually I had the fortune of speaking to him a couple of times while he was still alive. But I remember when I heard it the first time, it was, it's okay to be competitive, but don't root against somebody. So if I'm competing in you, it's not like, I hope Kale messes up and I hope he loses. I hope he strikes out. No, it's, I hope you do well, but I want to do better. And it's not a bad thing to do that. And I try to teach my kids that as well, but it's difficult in some of this changing world, and especially in the United States where we have this, entitlement perspective where everybody gets a trophy. And don't get me wrong, when the kids are young, 3, 4, 5, obviously you don't want 3-year-olds, taking each other, shoving their faces in the dirt. But the reality is, as you go through life, everybody doesn't always win. You mentioned the Olympics at 100. There's a reason there's gold, silver, bronze, and everything else. And it doesn't mean you're better than somebody. It doesn't mean that you're a loser or they're a loser. It means that on that exact day or in that exact sport or competition that they were better than you. And what it should do is it should inspire you to work hard and learn, okay, I messed up here, or this was not my best. And that's something that I think I battled with, and Jake and I spoke about that when he was on my episode and my podcast, excuse me. And I realized it too when I was younger, is I was super competitive. I have a sister and a brother, and my mom and my dad, my sister and I would play doubles in tennis. And there was a time when my sister said, I can't, you're way too competitive. And I didn't know how to turn it off at times. And I think, again, you grow and you learn, but it's okay to be competitive. And there's the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls 10-part series going on right now on ESPN called The Last Dance. And it goes back through literally Jordan's entire career, but the last season in 1998. And, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes where Michael, you can see why I think, and a lot of people think, he's the greatest of all time. And it's not because he was that much more talented than anybody. There are people that have been more talented after him, and there will be people in the future that are more talented, but he just had this inner drive to be the best and to win. And did he rub some teammates the wrong way? Of course he did. There are some of these guys sharing stories that said, Michael was a, fill in the blank word. And they said, but at the end of the day, he wanted us to win, and he brought out the best of us. Maybe he didn't always do it in the best way, but that's something that is good. And I think today, at 50, whatever Michael Jordan is now, I think he's 54, the reality is, he's learned a lot, and he probably would have done some things differently. But he said last night's episode, he said, there's a lot of stuff I wouldn't have done differently because I wouldn't have been able to win 6 NBA championships if I didn't do everything the same.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. And it's kind of reminded me a little bit of parenting there, is like, your parents are trying to do your best, right? Like, just like Michael's trying to win, for example, right? Like, as a parent, you're really just trying to raise the best kids that you can, doing the best you can. And maybe it doesn't always come across that way. But the end of the day, that's what you're wanting. You're wanting the best for your kids and the best development. That kind of resonated with me there. There's something about a couple things you said, as you brought up Zig Ziglar, and then you talked about gold, silver, and bronze being like, hey, you just weren't the best that day. And I think it brings up a couple things for me. One is there's a big difference between competing and comparing, right?
Ooh, yes.
And I think one is healthy, and I think one is not. And the one that is not is comparison. Is And then that brings up to me a quote that you're very familiar with, I'm sure, is failure is not a person, it's an event. And I think those together kind of wrap themselves up into it is I want to succeed, right, as a person. I want to keep growing as a person. So in order to do that, I got to put myself in stretch situations. By stretch situations, I mean competing, right? I put myself beside you and you take off on a sprint and you're faster than I am. No matter what that is, I'm going to run harder than what I would have if I was by myself, because you're there, you're pushing me, and I can use that as a measurement tool in order to compete with you. But if I compare myself to you, there's two things that I've found that are happening. One is I strip you of all your hard work, right? Like I'm basically looking at you like you don't deserve that, or like he didn't work hard for that, or she didn't work hard for that. And that sucks. First and foremost, it sucks. And then obviously I have to tear you down to build myself up, right? Like there's the quote there is like, don't break down the biggest building to build yours up to, make yours the tallest. I totally butchered that. Sorry, person who ever said that. But I think to kind of what you're talking about is that was something I definitely had to learn, was like everything I did was based in comparison. So therefore competition became a dirty word for me. And only until recently did I realize through getting back into basketball, old man basketball, that I can do something, take it quote unquote seriously, put out my best effort, and at the end of the day, feel like I'm not a good, bad, or whatever person because I wasn't the best on there. There was a point in time, Chris, where I didn't put my best foot forward because I felt like if I did, I was going to fail. And if I failed, then I was a failure. I had that attachment to it. And so it's a big difference there. So I didn't know kind of the difference in your mind. That was my question to you as I kind of go off on a tangent, is competing versus comparison, especially with young kids.
Yeah, that's such a powerful two words. And if you think about it and break it down, is competing versus comparing. And I think you've probably heard me say it, but you if you haven't seen, you probably see a bunch of posts I do on the topic. It's the whole, I think, negative perspective of social media is you look at somebody's page or their post and you say, oh, well, I get 3 likes on this and he got, 100, or I got, 20 views on this video and this person got 1,000. Don't get me wrong. It's better to have, everybody wants to have 100 views as opposed to 1, but it's not about that. It's about being the best that you can be. And you said something that was very, very honest, is, you had to learn a lot of things within that realm. So did I, and so do I. And I want to be very clear about that. So do I, because I am far from a perfect person. I'm far from a perfect father. I'm far from a perfect son. I was far from a perfect husband. But you said one of my all-time favorite quotes by Zig Ziglar is, failure is an event, not a person. I think that is hugely successful. And what you have to realize is you failed at that moment. You failed in that game. Michael Jordan has a really cool commercial that hasn't been out for a while, but he talks about all the shots he missed in his career. And then he talks about, 22 times I was tested to take the game-winning shot and I missed. But then he goes on and he says, and that's why I'm a 6-time NBA champion. That's why I was able to have this success, because every single time he quote unquote failed or missed a shot or lost a game, he learned from it. And I think that's the thing that people, and it's not millennials and it's not, Generation X or Y, it's everybody, is nobody wants to fail at anything. Nobody, and somebody on our event on Saturday said it best, is nobody gets up in the morning and says, you know what, I want to have a crummy day. I hope this is an absolutely horrific Monday, and I hope, I get in traffic, and I hope, I get rear-ended, and I hope, spill my coat. Nobody wants to do that. But when you lose, or when you quote unquote fail at that event, or you miss the sale, or you lose that game, it comes down to one of two things. Do you make the best out of it? And do you focus on learning and improving? Or do you focus on, I lost, I'm a failure, missed that sale, not going to get my quota? And again, it's not the Pollyanna positivity where everything is great. And I look at my day and I'm like, oh, I lost that sale. That's amazing. But it's say, okay, let me really take a deep look and say, okay, I thought I did well, but did I really do well? For me, especially early on, I was always asking people, hey, what did I do well on that podcast? Hey, Kale, you were on my podcast. Do you think I did a good job? Do you have any any suggestions. And I think the other perspective on that is I don't like the word constructive criticism. And the reason is I like constructive feedback, because criticism, I can't ever say a time in my life where I was criticized and it was really positive. But, people like to, they fluff it with like, let me give you some constructive, and they follow up with criticism. But basically it's like, let me just knock you down for a bit. But because I said constructive in the beginning of it, you should take it. And I jokingly say that to people, and obviously you just laugh. But when I'm working with teams and sales teams, I say, instead of approaching it that way, why don't you say constructive feedback? And here's the thing. When people hear that word criticism, it doesn't matter how successful you are. Your wall goes up. Your defense, you're like, all right, fight or flight. Like, all right, you want to criticize me? All right, buddy, like, let's see what you have. But think about this. If someone said to you, hey, can I give you a little bit of feedback on X, Y, Z? It's a less demeaning, and it also makes you feel, you know what? This person's willing to give me some feedback. But the other perspective is you have to be willing to take it, because you could offer me the most amazing feedback in the world. And if my arms are crossed and I'm not listening, it doesn't matter what you're saying, because I'm not being receptive to it.
Couple things. I laughed at that because it reminded me of a quote of a movies quote, which you're huge into movies. I know that just knowing you briefly, and it reminds me. It's Will Ferrell, and he used to say, "With all due respect," and then he would say, "Fuck you," right? And so, and they like, just because you say "with all due respect" doesn't mean you can say anything. And it's kind of like the constructive criticism thing. It's like, no, that doesn't like. So that went right into my head. It's funny. My mom, when I was younger, and I have a couple of friends this way. It's like, all you do is talk in movie scenes. Do you actually have any real words? Do you say any? Are these any of your real words? Since I don't watch that in movies. But I think you brought up a couple other things. So one is being able to take it, and I think. Tom Bilyeu talks about this on his podcast, especially in regards to his relationship on impact theory, was basically like when they have an altercation and they're trying to figure something out, the first thing he does is reaffirms. He reaffirms that,
yes,
hey, I appreciate the relationship. I love you. This is coming from a place. I'm not intending on doing this. And obviously with feedback, you are intending that, but it's kind of like, in order to take something like that from constructive criticism or give it, like if you're the person giving feedback, make sure that you reaffirm to them where you stand at in the relationship, like where you're coming from. And then the other thing that you did allude to was asking, right? It's like, can I give you some feedback? And then both parties can have that agreement, yes or no. The other thing I was going to kind of challenge you on a little bit of a perspective here is, nobody wants to fail. And I was almost, as you're kind of going through that, I was like, well, I probably agree no one wants to fail, but do you think that is something that super successful people seek out? And not in a way of like I think there's a way to maybe look at that word a little differently. Like, I want to take risks because I know there's growth in it. Now, I don't want to get in a car accident. I don't want to get rear-ended, something like you kind of talked about. I don't want to wake up and be like, hope something catastrophically bad happens. But for me, it's like, I know that every single time I put myself in uncomfortable situations, whether the result was what I want it to be or nothing, there was growth at the end of it. So I almost want to say like, it's like when you're working out, right? Like at some point, the people like, I'm going to speak to the CrossFitters in the room. Nobody's in the room, but like at some point, like, you smile at the squats that are like 10 past the ones you want to do. Like, you start to enjoy it because of where it's at. You start to develop this like familiarity with it, this comfort with the pain. I'm going to call it pain. But so I kind of want to challenge you on the failing part, because I almost to the point now is like, I'm doing this podcast, right? And if I didn't want to fail, I wouldn't do it, because I can already tell you, like, I think this is like episode 39 or 40, right? And like, if I never wanted to fail, we would have never been here. Like, I had to want to kind of say, okay, I've got to put myself out there, knowing that what I'm saying is got to grow. It's got to get better. I've never done a podcast before. How am I going to be good at it? It's like, I've never walked before as a little toddler. How am I going to go do anything else? So, yeah,
well, I'll share this with you. I absolutely love the word challenge. I think you and I spoke about that one of our first few conversations. I think when you when you preface something, well, this is a problem, and, here's the, issues you're going to have. I think, again, it goes back to your wall goes up. So first of all, I thank you for challenging me. And I want to say you're completely wrong. No, I agree in some ways. The one thing I would challenge you on is, and I think the way that some of the most successful people, and fill in the blank, whether it's sports, business, whatever, entertainment, movies, those people look at their failures differently. I think they still want to succeed all the time. I think they still want to always be successful, but I think it's the mindset, and it's the shift in their mind where they take that failure or take that really bad album, for example, somebody, a singer, a rapper, or, they have a bad album, they don't say, okay, yippee-ki-yay, like, I'm so glad we spent, a year and, $10 million on it. But internally they say, okay, what can we learn next time? And I think, you look at Thomas Edison with a light bulb, and, there's all these sayings that, he failed 10,000 times or 1,000, it's, as things, change over time. It's like, when I used to walk to school uphill, it snowed both ways and I had no shoes, and, you get older. But the reality is, I don't think within that Thomas Edison ever said, you know what, I want to really fail as many times as I can. Yeah. But it's you looking at it, and Oprah Winfrey talks about it, and she's got a podcast, and other people, but the most successful people that we look up to, you, myself, your listeners, are the ones that have failed so many more times than the others. But you don't see those failures, and you don't see the hard work behind the curtain. You see that social media perspective. You see that raising that championship banner. You see them playing in arenas of 20,000 people, but you don't see the fact that he or she practiced that song, 500 times with their band. He or she practiced that, that dance moves, 300 times, just for that 20-second dance. And I think that's the beauty of, but I loved how you worded it. And I would, highly recommend to your listeners out there is when they're talking to family, kids, business, friends, whatever, just think about using and implementing that word challenge, because that's how you get better, is when you challenge someone and say, hey, you know what, Kale, I think your journal is really good. I think your planner is really good. I would challenge you, maybe do this or maybe do that. Or instead of, this, instead of hoping to have 100 sales, why don't you go for 200? It doesn't mean you're going to get it. It doesn't mean you're going to be successful like that just because someone challenges you, but it's how you grow. And to your point, I love to grow. The reason I love to read books is not because I just want to have this ongoing, tally of books I've read, but it's because every time I read a book, good, bad, indifferent, I always learn something. And my father taught me, always have a conversation with somebody. I'm not talking about giving anybody and everybody hours upon hours of your time. But my dad taught me, especially in the financial world, is, when different people with different products and things want to come and pitch us, it's just have a conversation. Again, it's not giving that person 4 hours without knowing anything. It's, I'll give you 10 or 15 minutes on the phone, or if you're going to stop by my office, I'll give you 20 minutes or a half hour, because you're always going to learn from somebody what to do, what not to do, maybe a different thing to try. And I think that's the beauty of the word challenge is you help people. But again, you have to preface it in the right way, because if even, like I said, even the best message, the best guidelines, the best idea, suggestion, if you deliver it in a horribly negative or, defensive way to that person that's receiving it, it's not going to hit home.
No, and I kind of talked about earlier is like, you just mentioned that you want to grow, right? Like you're, incredibly moving that direction. And there was a point in time in my life I didn't want to grow. I even mentioned it earlier in the podcast, I was pretty static in my learning. And I know a lot of people. I live in Ohio. I'm from Ohio. And I see this a lot, that people don't really want to grow, that they want to stay. And I was curious to know if there was ever that point in your life where like you didn't want to grow and that you kind of had to ramp that back up. And then what was the motivation would really be what I would be after on that.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's anybody really, I don't care if you look at The Rock, Michael Jordan, you look at Beyonce, I don't think anybody can say, my entire life I've been driven, and every single day, no matter what I get up and it's just,
Sure.
go. The motivation, very simple, was just, and I've coined it, and David Goggins talks about it, but it's, he calls it the accountability mirror, the self-accountability mirror is looking at yourself and saying, is this the best I can do? And I want to be very clear, in no way, shape or form is it about perfection. It's not even remotely to that, but it's becoming a better version of yourself. So you asked you asked a very good question, and I'll be completely transparent here. When I was in school, I didn't always commit myself academically. And when it came to sports, I mean, I'll do anything, everything. If it's 2 a.m. or, 7:00 at night, there's a game, there's a practice, let me know, I'm in. And I mean, football, basketball, baseball, tennis, you fill in the blank, like I'm ready to go. But I realized that at some point is when I got into college was, getting a grade. It's not what life's about. You're not going to go to a job interview and be like, oh, here's my B+ on this class. Like I want this job. No, it's the information you take. And the same thing from working out. And you had mentioned, doing those extra squats. That's what it's all about in life for the people that I look up to and I aspire to be, is the ones that say, I'm successful, I'm doing well, but I can do more. And it's not from I want to be clear, it's not from a monetary perspective. Money obviously is important, to buy a house and provide for yourself, your family, but it's not about, okay, I have 10 million, I need 11 million. No, it's about, I've created this success based on this, I want to do more. So whether you're an author, you want to write another book, whether you're a speaker and you want to speak again, whether you're a podcast host and you just released your 39th or 40th episode, you say, all right, I want to get to the first 50 or the first 100. And that's, to me, is, and the other thing, you ask a very good point about the motivation perspective. What I've found, and it's not comparison in any way, shape, or form, is there are some people that don't have those same goals. And what I mean by that is there are people that want to get to a certain age, whether it's working at a job, want to get to a certain career level, they want to get to a certain income, they want to retire, and it's okay. But there are other people that just say, you know what, I just want to keep on learning. I want to keep on growing. And I want to be clear, it's not about that money. It's really nothing to do with the money side. It's just, I want to be a better version of myself. I want to be a better father, a better mother. I want to be a better son, better daughter. I want to be a better fill in the blank. And it doesn't mean, again, going after that perfection. And I'm a perfectionist, but I've done well on this podcast or this week. I think I can do a little bit better. I didn't like how I transitioned that way. What can I do better? And for me, it comes down to the self-analysis where you say, okay, look at your wins and your losses. And you were very kind to send me over your planner, and I got to take the chance to look at it. It's very similar to some of the stuff that's in mine. And it's, evaluating yourself and how do you grow and how do you improve, and, what are your areas of success today or this week? What are the areas that, you felt you could have done better? And to me, it's an exciting game, because if you're looking to really improve yourself, you're never, in essence, done. Even if you're 80 years old, there's things you still want to do well. You're obviously not going to compete as a college athlete as an 80-year-old, but to your point, why don't you try to go to the gym 3 days a week as an 80-year-old? Why don't you try to walk, 2 miles a day as an 80-year-old?
And that's what, as I look kind of in the times we're at now, is like even making a pivot, right? It's like, it's not about the thing like, okay, I have 10 million followers or $10 million, and then I need 11 and 100 million and so on and so forth. Like, it's the ability to even pivot, right? And so I know you're a huge Tony Robbins guy, and progress equals happiness, right? And so like having the ability to even pivot, and like for me, I see people who want to get to 60 years old and then they're, so life to them is accomplished, right? They got the A in life and then they're done. And it's like, to me, I'm going to be creating businesses and ideas until I'm 6 feet under, or my ashes are spread across the world, or whatever I choose at that point in time. But it's not always about growing in one direction too. It's about having the ability to pivot and do that. And then kind of something that brought up to me was like the other day, you and I were on Marco Polo, and you're like, hey man, you're trying to do a lot and you're doing this, and it's also staying rooted in who you are and being able to say, like, because I used to be a yes guy, like not everything. I was also a strong no guy, right? I was like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why do I need to do this? Why do I need third grade? Why do I need seventh grade? Like, why? And I'm a person who buys in, but after so long, I got so tired of like fighting that fight, like having to explain myself, or that all the people around me are like, can't you just be this way? Can't you just be this way? That I almost got to the point where I was like, okay, yes. Or like when someone has a suggestion about when I own the gym, it's like, well, you should do this. I was like, okay, fine, I'll try this. Now I've kind of like found that middle ground of like, yes, I understand, but does that fit who I am? Is that feel right to me? Like a lot of things that I'm doing right now is I'm becoming hyper aware of, one, asking myself good questions, to then follow my instincts. Like, is this a good fit for me? How do I feel about this right now? Does this motivate, like, where should I put my energy? What should I do? So I've been really asking my questions and following my gut. I have so many, like, I can't wait to take a picture of my notebook and post it to the Instagram afterwards, because I've been writing down so many things. I got 100 questions.
You said one thing I just want to touch on real quick, if that's okay, is
Yeah.
you know, used to be a yes guy, used to be a no guy, and probably we're very similar in those ways. But somebody shared something with me, and I forget who it was. I think it was on my podcast, but somebody, and they said it way more eloquently than I'm going to say it now. But every time you say yes to something, your direct result is you're saying no to something else. And what I mean by that is, I use the acronym WIN, what's important now. And there are things that you want to do, there are things you have to do, and there are things that you get to do. And I think that's very important, because there are things you have to do. So for example, you have to, you know, work in some way, shape, or form to put a roof over your head. Unless maybe you're, you know, a trust fund baby and you have, you know, $1 million in trust funds, that's a different story. But the reality is we all have things we have to do. We all have things we get to do, and they're all things that we want to do. And in no way am I saying that, you know, all you can do is the things you have to do and you never, but to your point, you said before you schedule an hour in your day to, you know, plan for nothing. By doing those things you have to do, you're allowed to do that. So for example, by doing A and B, you can do C, which is, all right, you know what? Today's Monday from, you know, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. I'm going to sit back, you know, because I've done all my stuff that I had to do, and I have my next meetings at 3, but from 2 to 3, you know, I'm going to sit back and read a book, or I'm going to read a book on one of the guests that's coming out from my podcast. That's the thing that I think is important, is every time you say yes, you're saying no to something else. And by saying yes to something, you don't always know what you're saying no to in the future. So for example, a day or two or a week down the road, maybe a friend is inviting you somewhere that's going to be really fun, or someone you'd love to go, but because you've committed to something else, you can't do it.
I'm going to pause this for a second. I got to take a leak. All right, I'm back. So I want to talk about that, because I had to go take a leak and I left that unrecorded.
You want to talk about that, or you want to talk about something else?
I want to talk about all of it.
Well, minus the leak part. Let's keep that to the side.
Okay. Well, I was getting ready to talk about hydration and why like I, as an athlete, what would have been like a weakness for you? For me, I'll go first, since I kind of bring this up. Is like, I did not hydrate at all, ever. Like I would only do it when I was like dehydrated. I would only drink like minimum water. And so like, I have my reasons now for obviously hydrating, but I've been on this huge fix of just like shoving water down my throat right now. One, because I think we're on the same path as far as developing the brain here and getting smarter and reading books and growing. And so for whatever reason, it clicked to me that, you know, hydrating is a key part into having quality brain health. So, there it is. So like, I mean, I'm constantly now like, okay, I got to keep water around, or I got to do this. It's kind of like forcing myself to do that. So.
There's a question in there? My weakness?
I said, yeah. I said, kind of like, what is something that you're kind of developing now? Obviously, boom, leeway, right into your fitness goals. 700 push-ups, man. Yeah.
So for me, I love my gym, and I miss the heck out of my gym. And I have a bunch of kettlebells, dumbbells. I have med balls. What else we got? Got a couple weighted jump ropes, got an ab roller, bought a stationary bike. And for me, it's just been challenging myself. So I'm trying to do 10,000 push-ups and 10,000 body squats this month, in addition to 350 miles and 35,000 calories burned just working out. So not walking around, not hanging out, just specifically workouts. But one of the things that for me, when I was playing in high school and college is, and it was not a long time ago, but the perspective of nutrition wasn't known to the extent that it is today. And the other aspect is, it wasn't until I was in college and after when I really started working with some trainers and and people within my college sports. And then when I was coaching college sports, I really understood the perspective of training for a specific sport. And I think you probably can attest to this is, it's like, oh, today's Monday, I'm going to do chest, and, tomorrow's Tuesday, so it's leg day. And not that there's anything wrong with doing those, but in today's day and age, there are smarter ways to get yourself ready. And I think as you try to be the best version of yourself, doesn't matter what it is. For you could never have been a runner, and your biggest goal this year is you're going to do a 10K. So what doesn't it make sense to figure out the best training regimen? Doesn't it make sense to get the best equipment? And I'm not talking about, buying $1 million, shoes and outfits. I'm saying, instead of running in a pair of tennis sneakers, or a pair of, hiking boots, maybe you go and spend, $100 or $125 and get a good pair of, but it's knowing. And I think the other perspective of is, because we want to continue to grow and be a better version of yourself, there's always more information, there's more resources as we continue to grow. And I think that's the one thing I share with people is utilize YouTube, social media, utilize those type of things. You get that information, but you still have to then take action. I think that's the biggest misconception is people say, oh, well, we're more resourceful now. And I said, well, I don't know if we're more resourceful now per se. I think we have more, and it's easier and quicker to get certain information. So for example, if there's a book I mentioned right this minute and you say, oh, I got to have it. The reality is you could have it either overnighted to you, via Amazon, or you can have it downloaded on audiobook or Kindle within seconds. Fast or rewind 10, 15, 20 years. I'm talking to you, we're having lunch. I say, oh, it's an amazing book. Your choices probably are go to the library and see if you can get it, or drive to a bookstore. And if they have it, you buy it. If not, they'll say, oh, we can order it. It'll take, 7 to 10 business days. And when we have it, we'll call you. Now you have it, but just because you have it, you still have to take action. So if I physically have that audiobook, I have to go ahead and press play. If I get that book overnighted via Amazon Prime the next day, I still have to open it up and read it. And I think that's one of the things that I think people miss the boat on, is just because you have those resources right now, it doesn't mean anything if a book's sitting on your shelf. It doesn't mean anything, if you have the most amazing, podcasts and things sitting on your phone. You have to go ahead and listen to them and take that action. And I think that's the biggest challenge I say with people in sports and improving where you have those weaknesses is, reach out to somebody, follow a program. There's amazing free content out there. Every podcast I know of is free. I don't know a single podcast that's out there where you have to pay for it. Now, maybe advertising, all the other stuff, but there's not a single podcast out there where I say, well, it's $10 an episode. It's free, but you have to go ahead and listen at first. And secondly, you have to go ahead and then apply and take action.
We're so good at, as humans, as making up and putting obstacles in front of us. I'm curious about that, actually, because I feel like when we don't know what's beyond the thing, then we have to put obstacles in this is just my own opinion. I feel like we put obstacles in front of us because we don't know what's after that. And so in order to keep us here and striving for something, we got to put obstacles in our way. And I feel like the obstacles start moving out of the way when there's a more distant thing in the future, a distant view. Like we kind of talked about the podcast before we started, was like, hey, getting a microphone, and hey, getting the setup. Not that you said I should have all those things to start, but to the point of bringing this back up is like, I could have made that a reason why I didn't do my first episode, right? The same thing with podcasts is like, it's about taking action. I could look as like, well, I don't have $15 for a new book, or I don't have $15 for this, but it's like, at this point in time, 10, 15 years ago, it was a bigger issue. Accessibility. Yeah. Right now, it's not, there's no excuses. Like I can do a podcast from my iPhone, which most people have access to any of those things. And if they don't, they have access to the library. And if they don't have access to that, they have access to walking, or like, for the most part, we kind of find ways. I'm curious to know like why we do that as a human species, why we put so many obstacles. And in my head right now, I feel like it's probably because we don't have a strong enough vision. We don't have a strong enough purpose to say, this isn't a big deal. Let's keep moving. Like, let's go beyond that. And a couple things that you talked about reminded me of. Do you listen to Jim Quick?
I do. I just got his brand new book. I think I'm like 30 pages into it. He's fascinating in many ways.
So that would be definitely somebody I want to meet or listen to speak more. But for me, he has a goal for his book, It's not to sell 1 million copies. It's to be the most read book, to your point, right? It's like, I want people to not buy it and sit it on their shelf. It does nothing for them. And it does nothing for me. It's all about that, about them actually reading, and then not only reading, but comprehending. And so,
do you know the statistics of how many books don't get read past the first 3 to 5 pages, and as well as the statistic of how many people after they complete their education, whether it's high school, college, the statistics within themselves are scary. I don't know them all by offhand, but there are so many books that people buy and just sit there. And to your point, I do follow Jim on Instagram, and he had an awesome episode on impact theory. I think it's a year or two old. I'm not sure if he's going to have another one now, because Tom typically brings people that he knows and likes back when they have a book or something. So I know obviously where we are currently with the coronavirus, Tom's not filming a lot now live, but I'm curious to see, how you can track that, because I think that's super spot on is people love to quote unquote get things. People love to acquire things, whether it's clothes, whether it's books, whether it's DVDs, whether it's all this stuff. And that's fine and good. But to your point and to Jim's point, what's the purpose and what good does it serve you or anybody else if you have an amazing book that's sitting on your shelf, or you have an amazing book that's under your desk somewhere? And that doesn't mean that, for me, I have a ton of books I haven't read yet that I've purchased and got. I just got one today that I mentioned from my buddy Jake Thompson, but it's having the discipline to go ahead and say, all right, you know what, for the next 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I'm going to do this. And I've become a crazy, crazy avid reader the last 10 years. And it's something that I see value in. And I read a ton of books, and I track all my books I've read, not from just the perspective of these are the numbers, but I track them to say these are the numbers that I've read, because I've learned a ton of stuff from it.
There's so much value to that. I in my head, it's just a law of compounding, right? Like, the more information I put in, I was doing this thought exercise the other day, so if we have 90% of the same thoughts every single day, I think it's somewhere around there, 70,
yeah.
90, right? Whatever it is, but 90% of our thoughts are all the same. So for me, it's like, if I read or if I learn something new a half hour a day, that's going to, change my thoughts this much. And if I do that every single day, it's going to change me as a person over a year. So I kind of like, okay, well, if I can do 2 hours a day, because this is my mind, it's like, if I can do 2 hours a day, I can really accelerate that, right? And I can really go. And the only other thing about that is like, it's the same thing with working out. Like, if I'm doing 2 hours of learning, I've got to give myself 4 hours of understanding, 4 hours of Kelly Starrett kind of talks about this. He says, if you work out for an hour, you should be recovering. I don't know if you know Kelly Starrett. No, he wrote the Supple Leopard. He runs the Ready State right now. He was, I don't know if he was a professional kayaker or not. He's a huge recovery guy. He's got all kinds of free stuff.
Recovery is the most
important,
over thought about and under delivered act out there. And I'm a huge follower of Wim Hof, and I've really been messing during this coronavirus with the recovery of frozen baths. And I'll tell you right now, in no way, shape, or form do I like them as far as doing them. But for me, like today, like I had a really good workout this morning, and right before I went to the office, I, grabbed a shower and I sat in a cold tub for 10 minutes. And I kid you not, when I say freezing, I have other words I want to use, but out of respect for my mom, I'm not going to say the words I want to use, but I literally was like, there's a chance I could die from, hypothermia. I was so cold, but after you feel that much better.
You do. It just melts it away. I want to circle back before we kind of finish up here is the 1 hour that I schedule of nothing is I want to kind of clear that air for you or maybe the audience. Is like, that's the difference of me not only awarding myself, but most people watch 2 hours of TV. Most people watch. There you go. 3, right?
No. 3 hours and 52 minutes.
Oh my God. See,
that's a Gallup poll. It came out last year. Obviously there's really no way to check that now because of YouTube and because of all these, Hulu and all this stuff. But no, dude, it's 100% right. That's insane if you think about
it. And so to me, it's like when you say, look at my schedule, and if you don't look at the whole thing, you'd be like, well, he's just doing nothing. It's like, well, I'm not doing these things that most people are doing. And this is something that really bothered me when I looked at, I think we do this on social media a lot. We glamorify like, oh, they have the most amazing life, right? And so they're like, or they're always working. And it's like, no, because if you listen closely, like, I think I'm just going to say the Rock, right? He still watches TV, right? He still watches, Joe Rogan talks about how busy he is, which he's busy. Don't get me wrong, but he still talks about Ozark, which is a Netflix show. Like, so it was really refreshing to me. It's like, oh, like there was a point, dude, I wouldn't even like, this is gross, by the way. This is my first time saying this publicly. I would barely shower because I felt like I didn't have time to keep up with everyone else. Like I felt like I didn't deserve it.
That is pretty gross.
Made it yet. It is gross. But the point is that like that's how much the effect had on me, because I felt like I had to work all the time, and to the point of working out more than recovery, or reading and learning so much and not having recovery.
Not to interject real quick, but I don't think anybody that and I think it's interesting. I think my grandmother taught me when I was young is, you watch out for those people that say never, I never do this, or like I've never done that, or I would never do this. Now, I'm not saying in any way that The Rock watches, 37 hours of TV a week, but, look at the most successful people. They do not work 24 hours a day. There's not a single person that has created yet this, plug-in where they put their headphones in and plug into something and they say, okay, you're going to recharge for 10 minutes in the equivalent of, 10 hours of sleep. Everybody has their vices. Everybody has their time. Now, for some people, to our point, it might be 3 hours and 52 minutes of TV. For Joe Rogan, it might be an hour long or less than that episode of Ozark. For The Rock, it might be, as he's having one of his cheat meals, he might put on a movie. And I follow The Rock a lot. He's one of those guys that I absolutely admire as far as his work ethic. Is he over the top in some ways? Yes. Are some of his movies kind of goofy and silly? Of course. But when it comes down to work ethic, it's hard to. And I think that's something as I've gotten older, and probably a lot of Zig Ziglar and other people that came in where it's like if you were, Will Ferrell, I know people that say, Will Ferrell, I just can't stand his humor. I said, well, how about you word it differently? Instead of you saying you can't stand his humor, why don't you say, I'm not a big fan of his movies, but he works hard and he does a lot of stuff for the community, and it's just changing the channel a little bit. But anybody that will tell you that they never watch TV, they never have a cheat meal, they never have any, those are the ones you watch out for, because usually those are the ones that when the lights are off, they're either binging with the food or they're turning stuff on. But I still would love to see that one person, whether he or she can never sleep and never eat a single bad thing ever, and they have $10 billion in their bank account.
And I think for me, it comes down to well, if they're not working so much, then how are they achieving that success? And the thing that I've kind of learned now as I'm approaching 30 is just, and another reason why I feel so confident in myself and putting myself out there is because, one, I know no one's perfect. First, perfect's boring anyways, by the way. It's just repeated over and over again. Like, there's no fun in that. But the other thing I've kind of noticed about, and even like listening to Joe Rogan over the last 3 years, is like, it's all about being authentic, right? Like that is the speed of which everything I think happens for these people. Is like, if you listen to their journey, they were trying to be somebody else, or they were trying to fit this mold or that mold. It didn't happen right away, but like Adam Sandler comes to mind, right? Super authentic in my mind, super authentic. I feel like a camera could be on him all the time and it would be no different than him doing his life. And I feel like when I start looking at people who are successful and what I would call also happy, like show themselves happy or have time for these other things and have good perspectives and don't try to change people, it's just them being super authentic. And so I was kind of curious about that for you. Have you noticed a change in your life coming into more authentic you?
Oh, 100%. I think it happened even before I went through my divorce, in the sense of, just admitting areas that I want to improve, admitting areas. And the other thing too is also admitting when you've done things well. So for example, when I do a good speaking event where I think I did a good job, the feedback is okay. It's okay to accept that, admit that as well. But it's being authentic is, I did this well. I want to improve this better. I'm kind of staying in this lane. I'd like to open up this lane too. And I think it's when you really openly and honestly evaluate that stuff, it turns into a different person.
Love it. I want to wrap this up and be respectful of your time. I really appreciate already just like how much we've become close and been able to talk to one another. Couple of things. I like this question that you asked, so I want to ask it back, which is if you could go to dinner or a meal, it could be any meal, right? It could be any meal, right? So I want to add a layer to it. It could be any meal throughout the day with any person, dead or alive. Who would it be?
So I'm going to take a little bit of creativity here, and I'm going to say that I'm going to have dinner with a couple people. And I know that that's not the answer, but The Rock is definitely one of them. Michael Jordan is one of them as well. And I'm going to also throw out Tom Bilyeu because I love what he's done on Impact Theory. And I would like to have David Goggins be the waiter.
That is hilarious. All right, so since you kind of went not off topic, you kind of did a different layer on me. All right, now so you have to go with The Rock, MJ, and Tom, but you have to pick a meal with them: breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
Oh, definitely dinner. Dinner is typically on average the longest meal.
Oh, I meant you got to put MJ at breakfast, or you got to put MJ at lunch.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So Tom's definitely breakfast. The Rock is going to be lunch, and MJ is going to be dinner because, like I said, dinner's. I don't know anybody that said, "Oh, I had a 4-hour breakfast," but there are a ton of people that said, "What time did you go to dinner?" I'd be like 7:30, and we had drinks and cocktails, and so yeah, that's a good question. That's a good follow-up. See, not only are you a good podcast interviewee, you did a fantastic job on my show. I think you do a really good job on your show. But that was quick thinking on your feet. So kudos for that. I like that one.
I liked it too, but I'll accept the compliment for sure. I'll say I did a good job. I appreciate that.
You get 2 thumbs up.
I'm just a curious guy, man. So okay, we got to do the plugs for you. I want to know where people can find you. Just repeat that for them since they've been with us for an hour. Maybe just let them know some of the things you maybe got working. And social handles, all the information. Let them know where they can find you and how they can support you.
Awesome. I appreciate that. So for me, I'm super, super transparent. I love to connect with people. I love the opportunity. So it's not just saying it, but I want to follow it up. And by that, I always give my personal email address, which is chris@noquitliving.com. The podcast, you can find it. It's No Quit Living, however you listen to podcasts. And then our website is noquitliving.com. And we're the most active on Instagram as far as our social media. We've done a pretty good job kind of building and growing that. But like I said, I love to connect with people. And for me, the opportunity to help people, it's just really cool. And the one thing I will say to your listeners, the reason that I had the opportunity, honor of not only having you on my show, but also being a guest on your show is because I reached out to you when I saw something. So the challenge I leave to your listeners is very simple as this. Social media and technology in today's day and age is amazing. You can connect with some incredible people, but you still have to go ahead and take that action. So I'm super, super proud of the fact that I reached out to you, not from a selfish perspective, because we wouldn't be here today and you would not have been on my show if I didn't reach out to you.
Well, I certainly agree with that. And it was such a blessing to have social media. Obviously, you had a little kind of answered that last question for me is what would be the little piece of advice that you have for everyone as we wrap up? And it seemed like it was action, but I'll give a real opportunity to kind of one piece of advice, information, thing on a billboard, whatever it might be. What would be the last thing we close up with?
Yeah, I think that's a fun question, and I think I've answered it probably a million times. But for me, it's just when those times get tough, when you want to give up, just keep going one more day. Today's the day you want to give up, and you think you've had enough. Just keep going one extra day. Give it one more opportunity. It doesn't mean, like I said, I'm not saying don't ever give up. I'm saying just keep going. Give it one extra day, because a lot of times, and the analogy, the quote is so many people have given up on the 1 yard line. They've gone from their end zone all the way down the field, and they're just like, you know what, I can't do it. And that's the question I always have is, how many people are buried with their dreams, their goals, the book that was never written, that movie that was never created, that song that was never written. So just keep going a little bit longer. And like I said, it's a lot of times you're at the 1 or 5 yard line, and we're all so much closer sometimes than we think we are.
Oh man, I appreciate it. It's kind of like a quote that I heard. It's always too early to quit,
Yes. Always too early to quit. I think Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, a very, very smart man.
I love it. Well, again, man, I appreciate you. We'll be in contact. Thanks for doing the podcast. Everyone, do me a big favor and go out there and support Chris and his goals, his dreams, and what he's up to. It's big stuff. So I appreciate everyone. Love y'all. And thank you, Chris.
Thank you, sir.